Welcome to the Greater Culture Podcast, where movement, mindset, and mastery meet. Join us as we explore the art of living fully with expert guests and real-life stories to inspire your journey. And welcome to another episode of the Greater Culture Podcast with your host, Brad Marshall. And today, I am joined by Stephen Scrobe from O2X. He's somebody who I've gotten to know over the last couple of years through O2X. He's got a really cool background of 15 years in law enforcement, really passionate about health and wellness and helping people over 20 plus years in that industry. So I'm excited to dive in and learn from him of what he's experienced, what he's learned over the years, combining some of that work and how it impacts health and wellness and fitness. So, Stephen, thanks so much for joining me on the podcast today.
Yeah, thanks, Brad. Appreciate you bringing me on. Definitely a privilege to come out and talk.
Yeah, and I know we've had some great conversations over the years as we've worked workshops together. And so I'm excited to learn a little bit about your story and how you went from law enforcement and then also into the health and wellness space, owning a gym and helping people with their health and fitness. So tell me a little bit about where your passion for health and wellness and fitness and all of that came from.
Yeah, it's been a long journey now, I can say. Not always the best at times, but it's I kind of fell into law enforcement when I was younger. Collegiate athlete, was getting out of college, didn't really know what I want to do. Kind of fell into law enforcement. Turned out I loved it. Ended up really getting into it with SWAT, canine training detective, had a lot of really great opportunities throughout my career. Tried to stay physically fit throughout, became an avid triathlete when I was younger. And I tried to keep that going because it's one of those life sports that can just help you with everything. And I just stuck with that most of my time before I got into more powerlifting, kickboxing, Muay Thai, Jiu-Jitsu, things like that, just more for safety than anything else. Because if there's anything out there that law enforcement should be doing, it's some kind of martial art. It doesn't necessarily have to be Jiu-Jitsu, but definitely like just from a safety standpoint and an officer safety standpoint, everybody should be involved in something because the standard amount of training we typically get, both for physical fitness and for self-defense, is not enough to really be proficient, I think. And there should be more of a focus on doing those things in your off time. Like if we're going to talk about longevity and healthy careers and how to keep ourselves the safest, I think that's a big part of the message that I tried to instill in people when I became a training detective is, hey, we have to do more for what we're doing in law enforcement now, because if we do it the way it's always been done, we're going to continue to have these same kind of problems. I was fortunate. I did a 15-year career. I was canine towards the end of it, which is absolutely one of the best jobs you can have in law enforcement. You get to play with a dog all day. I had a dog that was patrol certified, so he went out and found people, and then narcotics certified, so we went out and found drugs. So it was a great time, a great experience. A lot of injuries that came through that, mostly because you're catching dogs, taking your shoulder back. It's a lot of running constantly, a lot in heavy equipment and gear. A lot of knee issues, shoulder issues that came along with it. I wish now looking back, and I think that's part of why I got into the health and wellness space is I wish I had the knowledge that I have now back when I first started, because it probably would have saved me from a lot of that, injury, illness, and heartache. And also, like when it comes to mental resilience and things like that, a lot of the stuff that we have the opportunity to teach with O2X now would have been very, very useful at the beginning of my career, because, a lot of times we get into law enforcement and we say, all right, well, we wear these things like trauma, stress, divorce, addiction issues, sleep issues, injuries, and we kind of take them on like a badge of honor. Like it just comes with the territory. When really, like, we can thrive throughout a career and never have any of those problems if we're just coached properly on how. But that's not the messaging coming in, and a lot of the expectations we almost set for ourselves aren't necessarily the best. So after 15 years, I decided I was going to walk away from law enforcement, retire out. I always had aspirations of getting into the health and wellness coaching business. Wanted to start my own organization. So we actually moved up to South Carolina from Florida, and I started a nonprofit that was initially aimed at getting smaller law enforcement agencies in the area training and education they wouldn't normally get, whether that's fitness education, that's self-defense tactics, firearms tactics, what have you. At the time, I was going to a CrossFit gym, and the head owners came to me and said, hey, I think what you're doing would probably be really well received by the general public. Maybe you should consider starting a business. We can partner here. You can use the space and we can work something out. And that's generally how I got into the coaching the coaching business. Went out, just took it off from there, started coaching what I knew initially from tactical strength and conditioning, and then on the self-defense side. And then that just ended up growing, got more interest in it, ended up getting the CSCS and TSAC certifications to help expand my knowledge. Started studying more and getting more into that. And it was great. It just took off from there. And that was really how the business snowballed. My wife at the time, she had started her side of the business, which was more holistic healthcare, as a holistic health practitioner, which she still runs today, thankfully. And that's thriving and doing very, very well its own right. And I help her with that on the physical end. But yeah, we did that for a few years. And then I ended up falling into a lead instructor position with O2X Human Performance, which was just a great opportunity to give back to the law enforcement and fire community, where we can go and basically we take care of those who take care of others. Our goal is to provide that holistic health and wellness training and education and staffing resources so that first responders have that opportunity to realize that self-care isn't selfish anymore. Like, and if you're not taking care of your body now, it's going to pay down the road. At some point, it's going to catch up to you. So the best time to pay attention to it is now, whether you're 2 days out from being out the door for retirement or you're 2 weeks in. Like, there's no better time to start taking care of your body and making small incremental changes than right now. And I had the opportunity to do that for 2 years, right up until they brought me on to do business development as an account executive. So now for all of the Southeast, I handle any kind of program growth, trying to install these programs with the training and education in any kind of municipal agencies. So it's been great. It's been a huge learning curve over the last 5 years that I've gone on this journey. I've run a lot, learned a lot, but I've also had the opportunity to see, like, I work with individuals like yourself that come out on the mental resilience side and the mental performance side. And then everyone else that we get to work with is just an extreme wealth of knowledge that it's like a never ending, lesson or education on health and wellness overall too. And it's great because it's not just in the strength and conditioning world. It's not just how many sets and reps we're designing for someone. It's just completely holistic. Like, we're talking about the mental game, nutritional, which is huge. And then even the sleep and fatigue and recovery portion that I had spent so many years previously ignoring, that was really, in essence, a large part of the problem that I had with my development personally, because at some point, like, in my athletic career, I hit a plateau, and it was largely because of that. I was running myself into the ground, and it doesn't matter how many sets and reps you're doing. If you're not allowing your body to hit that recovery, you're not going to see those results. But speaking from a place of experience now, my goal is that I can hopefully encourage others to not make those same mistakes and really change the culture around what we do as first responders and how we approach health and wellness as first responders, to stop wearing this trauma like a badge of honor and start saying, hey, we need to not only be taking care of ourselves, but also be encouraging to the rest of our craft to do the same. Because that's something that I think we also kind of stumble into.
Yeah, I think it's fascinating. You mentioned falling into some of these different professions and then looking back, getting into health and fitness to try and help with some of the challenges you experience. When you first got into law enforcement, what were some of the, whether it was education or practices back then? Was it just kind of like a learn as you go when it comes to maintaining your own personal health and wellness? Coming out of college as an athlete, I imagine like you had a foundation of movement and working out, but now you're going into the shift work. And I know there's a lot of stigma around how you approach your job in law enforcement. I get a chance to work with a variety of law enforcement populations. So what was your first introduction into how to handle your own personal health and wellness as someone in law enforcement?
It's so bipolar depending on who you talk to. So you have the people out there that everybody generally agrees it's great to be in better shape. Obviously, it's good to be in good shape, but there's a whole faction of people out there that say I can do my job regardless of how I feel, how I look. As long as I can do my job, I should be fine. And yes, that is true to a certain extent, but is that the best for your body, and is that the best for you stress management wise? Because yeah, you might be physically capable, but how's your home life? And they don't put too much emphasis on that. Back then, back when I started in 06, there wasn't any emphasis on self-preservation. It was you're going to work. Like, I basically got the worst speech of my career when they came in the academy and they were like, listen, this is law enforcement. You're going to work overtime when you shouldn't. You're going to have back issues, knee issues, shoulder issues. You're probably going to have family issues, substance abuse, sleep issues. You're going to be depressed. But welcome to law enforcement. This is the greatest job on earth, front row seat. We take care of each other and, go out and get it. And as a 21-year-old, you're getting in there and you're looking for that adrenaline dump of like working in a great area in law enforcement to be. And you're like, yeah, let's go. And like 40-year-old me is like, are you an idiot? Like, why would you get excited about that? Like, that makes zero sense. But that was the culture, is like you get in and it's work, work, work. Like there's always more to be done, because generally in law enforcement, we tend to be service oriented. So we want to be the answer we want to be everybody's answer, right? You can't, and you, at some point you have to realize you can't be everything to everyone all the time. Like, you have to scale that back. You have to at some point look inward and be able to take care of yourself, because if there's nothing inside, you're not doing any good on the outside. And it's that hard realization, which is why so many law enforcement officers tend to run themselves into the ground. And we have so many cases of burnout, is because we never take that time to come back and refill our cup and rejuvenate. And that was a lot of that culture coming in, is just, you have to be better. You have to do more. Like, you have to go to the mandatory overtimes. You have to do this. Like, it's just a lot of responsibility. And no one in the agency is ever going to come along and say, hey, you look like you're doing too much. Maybe you should do less. That never happens. And especially with smaller agencies, sometimes you end up wearing too many hats, and there's nobody coming to save you if you don't stick up for yourself and your own interests and kind of really prioritize what's important in your life. And if it's work, that's great, but there's got to be something else outside of that, because at some point we all have to walk away. And something I like to speak to people about when I have the opportunity at the workshops is, I ask them, like, this is something that I had to deal with, is you have to ask, who are you without your title? And if you don't have an answer to that, that's maybe something you might want to do a deep dive into and start considering, because like, I was struggling to run a business when I got out of law enforcement. It wasn't necessarily the best mindset to be in as a law enforcement officer, to go and run a gym. And my wife came to me and she said, hey, listen, you have to figure out who you are without canine officer in front of your name. Because you're, as much as you like to think you are, that's not you anymore. Like, you have to move on from that, and you need to start thinking like a coach, thinking like a business owner, because it's a completely different mindset. Like, you have to start being an example for that, not an example of what a good law enforcement officer would be. Because they're not the same necessarily. So
Yeah,
it's
I
a
think
little.
that's such a powerful question to ask, of who are you without the title, regardless of the line of work you're in. We can get really passionate and driven and excited by whatever the work is we do, but if we're completely defined and consumed by that, then we're going to be in these emotional highs and lows depending on the outcome or how the job goes or how other people see us. And I imagine, as a young 21-year-old, you mentioned being hard charging, excited, motivated. It's almost like, oh, you doubt me that I can figure it out and navigate this? Like, let me see. How long would you guess you were able to kind of charge forward before you started to realize, like, wow, like, this method or this way of engaging with my job and everything else is wearing me down, and I'm not able to show up as the type of person I'd like to be or do my job as effectively as I can? Because I think you can probably push that for a long time. I mean, some people make a whole career of doing it.
Yeah, there are a lot of people out there that they'll just go an entire 25, 30 years on that, and just out of spite, like, I'm going to do it because I can. And again, it's part of that culture that's driven and that's built in. That's all, it's expected. And that's the problem. Like, you're expected to have that mindset. I think the problem that kept it going is that I was really good at redirecting my attention. Like, at first, it was like 3 years. I was solid. I was a rookie. I was learning the craft. I was getting good at what I was doing, making a lot of arrests. And then it kind of transitioned when it started to get mundane and it started to become overwhelming. My attention shifted and it focused. I refocused to, like, I went through the fire academy. Thought I wanted to go be a firefighter while I was a cop. Put myself through the fire academy. Turned out that after that, my schedule changed. So to continue my paramedic training, like, I would have had to leave my job completely, which I wasn't willing to do at the time. So I was like, all right, well, I guess I'm in law enforcement for the rest of my this is it. This is my career, because that was life to me. So then I went and I joined the SWAT team. And then once that happened, I started getting better training, started getting better opportunities at work, started getting better work in general, more exciting work. So now I had this new shiny object to grab a hold of. And it was more of this, and it was a little bit healthier mindset, because to be part of a unit like that and a team like that, you definitely need to take care of yourself. You need to show up as one of the elite, for lack of a better way of saying it, because you want to be the example. You don't want to be the one that looks bad on your team to the rest of the agency. So, like, there is a little bit more emphasis on personal reflection. and like where you're weak at and picking up those areas. And that's a huge driving force a lot of times is your expectations are up here. So now you raise your own level of expectations because of the ones that are put on you, which is a phenomenal motivator for me at the time, being 26 and going into that role. So that kind of renewed that experience for me, where a lot of people will just get that burnout and they'll just go through the motions every day. And then like it's that constant switching, I think, of being able to find things that you love about what you do, even in the midst of traumatic experiences or difficult months or years that you might have where you're disappointed, is being able to find the good in that and being able to refocus on what's working well and what you really do enjoy. And that kind of kept it evergreen for me for a really long time until eventually it started to catch up because I really wasn't resting well. I wasn't sleeping well. And towards the end of my career, my wife actually posed the question to me as I was working a lot of overtime. 12 out of my 15 years, I was on night shift. That didn't help. I had 2 young children towards the end of my career, and it was very much the conversation of, hey, you're not going to promote because you love what you do working with a dog. So your shift schedule is never really going to change. You're working constantly. You wear 3 different hats between training, SWAT, and canine. They're never going to take that away from you. Like, at what point do you want to stay home and watch your kids grow up? Because you're missing that. Like, you're, and it came down to a priority. And it was hard to say that, like to myself, or to hear that even. But when you put it in perspective, it's like, what's most important in your life right now? And yeah, I could go and continue to do what I do, and we would be fine. Everything would be okay. I would make it work. I would still love what I do. But at home, my time with my family would be suffering because I was never able to find that balance. So I said, you know what, I'm going to chase my ambitions that I had. We'll make it work however we can, and we'll jump 2 feet into that, and we'll go try that. As scary as it may be, we're gonna try, and we'll make it work however it has to. And we ended up doing that, and it worked out well, thankfully. But a little nerve-wracking to jump into something completely foreign, from something that's been so embedded in your life for 15 years, you know. And it was a hard choice, but ended up working out for the better.
Yeah, and I think one of the things you mentioned there is being able to advance in your career and pursue the next level, if it's just you, is very different than when you've got significant others, children, families involved, because now all of a sudden there's a lot of other hats that you're wearing, like you mentioned. And I think for some folks, as soon as like the other people come involved, it gets really challenging now to be able to balance the health and wellness and the social and the relationships, because of not just the things maybe you're seeing at work, but also just because of the time constraints. I know the department here in the town I live in, they do 2 weeks back and forth. So you do 2 weeks of days and then 2 weeks of nights. But like you said, you did nights for just about your whole career. How did that impact your just overall sort of health and wellness? Because I think when we look at one of the foundational pieces of our health, it's sleep. And anytime you get into this type of shift work, whether it's 12 hours, 24 hours, whatever it might be, we know sleep is going to maybe not be as available as we'd like it to be. So how did you navigate that?
I didn't, for lack of a better way of putting it. To be fully upfront and candid, I had a lot of issues over the course, because in the beginning, your body will compensate. When you're younger, you're a little better at that, and you think you're bulletproof. Like, and then you don't realize it until years later, when your body's been, steadily breaking down over time because of that lack of recovery. Because you'll wake up, and somewhere along the line, somebody said you only need 4 or 5 hours of sleep and you can survive, and that is complete horseshit. Sorry, but that's just, you can't do that. Like, that is unhealthy. You need to be getting the rest and recovery that's going to reap the benefits of everything you've been doing. Because if, like, especially if you're on a regular training regimen, like a large part of my early career, I was training for Ironman races, things like that, like long distance endurance races. And if you're putting that work and you're a heavier individual, over 200 pounds, like myself, you're putting a lot of wear and tear in your joints. So if you don't have that recovery piece, it might not manifest right away, but 5, 6 to 10 years down the road, now all of a sudden you have, ACL and meniscus pain, and you don't know how or where it came from. Like, it just shows up out of nowhere. And I think that's part of the problem with that sleep issue, especially when you want to be all things to all people, like I mentioned earlier, because you get home and you want to be home and present for your marriage or your kids, and there's definitely that emphasis of doing all the things. where you don't just want to focus on work. So then where do you have to sacrifice that time? And you get that fear of missing out. And that's always going to come from the sleep portion, because it's the least sexy of the things we get to do during the day. Nobody ever makes sleep sexy. They're not like, oh, we have to get rest. I got to get my 8 hours. And that actually eventually led to me. It was fortunate. I don't mind talking about it at all, because I hope other people also don't make the same mistake, because there's a lot of hormone replacement that happens in law enforcement or first responders in general, I think, in that our agency tested us, got our blood tested. And I highly recommend everybody does this, just to get a baseline of where they're at on a regular basis. But it came out my overall testosterone was in like the gutter. It was like below 100, which if anybody knows numbers, like that is like there are dead people with more than that. So I went and saw a doctor, got on TRT. Like I felt like I should. I'm like, oh yeah, this is going to be great for me. I'll feel like $1 million because now I've looked for the easy button and I've solved my problem. But if you still don't sleep and you still don't recover, it doesn't matter how much you take, your levels just plummet anyway, because your body essentially flushes it out because you're not having that time to recover and utilize it properly. So I got a second opinion, because it like eventually you become a walking pharmacy, because now you're on TRT, you're on blockers, you're on everything else that needs to make your body function normally. And if your answer is to constantly load yourself up with more medicine, maybe it's time to reassess your lifestyle and what you have going on that's underlying causing all of these needs. So I did that. I went to another second recommendation for a doctor, and he did an analysis of my life. He's like, dude, you just need to sleep. It's like, it can't be that. It literally cannot be that easy. Like, you have to be. He's like, no. He's like, what do you have to lose? You save a ton of money. You might as well try it. Just get selfish about your sleep. So I did. And we had a hard conversation, said in the house, like, listen, I'm going to dedicate myself to this. I want to get healthier. I want to get like better, essentially. And that's what I did. I dedicated my time to being selfish about my rest and recovery periods, and eventually got off all of my medications that I was on well over 3 years ago. Like, and it's like, even since then, higher skeletal muscle mass, higher VO2 max. Like, it's insane, like the amount of results you can see just by doing the simple things right, And a lot of times we think that there's going to be this easy button answer that everybody's going to run to that just says, oh, I just need this medicine, or, oh, I just need this supplement, and everything's automatically going to click. But if you're not doing the basics right first, the supplementation isn't going to matter as much. Do the nutrition part right. That was another thing that I had to dial in and I had to focus better on, because nutritional opportunities for law enforcement in the middle of the night, not ideal. Like, they're not going to be the healthiest options that you have. So I had to take a long look at that, my diet and my nutrition. And then the sleep and fatigue management was huge. Man, realizing how much mental clarity that gave me during the day, how much that gave me the ability to show up and be present, whether I was with my children, I'm being a husband, or coaching, like in running my business. Like, just being present and being there was huge, because I had that rest and recovery time to give myself to be fully there and give everything to my business. And again, that came with that mindset switch, because it seems selfish at first, but it's really not in the long run.
Yeah, I think one thing that always comes to mind is this idea of pain is the greatest motivator for change. So to go see the doctor, to go get something checked out, like something has to be going on that finally it hits a spot where you're like, okay, I probably need to go search out or figure out what's going on here. So when it came to going to see a doctor about some of the hormone stuff and testosterone, were there certain either symptoms or things you were experiencing that you're like, all right, it's hit a breaking point where I need to go figure out what's going on? Because it's one of those where I imagine people who maybe have low testosterone as well are like, I don't know, I just kind of power through everything. I didn't really notice or was aware that those were the things I was experiencing that led me to say, hey, I should probably go maybe get it checked out.
Yeah, no, and it wasn't anything glaringly obvious. I was like, man, I feel like I need this. Like, I had no problem still keeping my numbers and strength up, or being able to run the numbers that I wanted to. Like, that wasn't any kind of an issue. Like, I was exhausted all the time, I'd say. Just generally like fatigued throughout the day. But when you're not sleeping and you have 2 young children at home keeping you awake all hours of the night, like, that's just normal. Like, you're like, oh, this is my life now. This is what we do. Like, because we're very involved parents. We we pay a lot of attention to our children and try to do what's best and right by them a lot. And sometimes that came with sacrificing our sleep, to make sure we're there for them and they have everything they need. And I think all parents are the same, especially with young children. So you wake up tired and you automatically think it's just because I didn't sleep. And it's because I'm overworked and I'm constantly dealing with everything else and all the other stressors. Never I didn't even think it would have been that until I got tested. And then when I got tested, I was like, oh, well, maybe this is something I should probably pay attention to now. We'll see if there's a better answer because this is not good. And that it's not necessarily that the supplementation was the answer for it. It was the fix your lifestyle. That was actually the answer that, because a lot of times we say, oh, you have this problem. And rather than saying what caused the problem, we just look for the answer. Yeah. It's give me the short answer, virgin, because that's way easier than me changing my lifestyle. But again, it forced that little bit of self-reflection, which is, I think, one of the best things people can do on a regular basis, or that a coach can teach athletes to do on a regular basis, is that self-analysis and self-reflection, because we always like to see ourselves as the hero. It's nobody's ever the villain in their own story, right? So you're always doing it right. So anytime you can do that self-analysis and that self-reflection and realize there might be a better way out there, the better off you're going to be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's a huge piece of it is to do those check-ins, whether it's the daily, weekly, whatever amount it is, and see trends that are emerging and figure out what are the things that are maybe not allowing me to live the way that I'd like to, or to feel like I'm thriving in the area that I'm striving to be better in. And one of the things I think that comes to mind, especially when you mention, sleep and nutrition, is this idea of the education piece and how little education there is, especially for certain lines of work like law enforcement or shift work. When you started or through your career, did you ever have any education or hey, you're primarily going to be on night shift, here's best practices, or here's what we can say to help you to acclimate? Or was it kind of you just had to learn from your peers of here's some strategies they tried or they did, and good luck, let's hope you can navigate it and figure it out on your own?
Yeah, that was basically it. This is how we're going to do it because it's the way it's always been done. And nobody came in unless you had when it came to doing my job, I was fortunate that I had some phenomenal mentors that took me under their wing and said, hey, this is how we operate. This is how we work. This is what works best for this area. And they really taught me how to do my job very well. Nobody came in and talked to me about any of the other issues at home or working shift schedules, or you try to get advice from here and there based on but it's all just individual case study kind of stuff where this worked for me. And it's so individualized with how everybody lives their lives that it's really hard to create a set standard sometimes. And at the time, we didn't have any of that scientific data backing the importance of rest and recovery and sleep. And everybody in law enforcement, you'll find, or fire service has they have their own brand of fitness and what they're trying to accomplish. You have your bodybuilders, you have your cardio guys, you have, your power lifters. And it depends on really, you don't want to take that away from them either, but you also have to emphasize that we have a job to do that is very task specific. You're going to need explosive power. You're going to need some strength. You're going to need a little bit of endurance, especially on the fire side. You should have a good VO2 max. That's going to be really important for air consumption. So we have certain things that we know are important that we should be keying up on, but a lot of people choose to ignore that because they have their own personal interests at hand. And again, you don't want to take those away, but you also want to try to be setting up a workout that's most effective for your performance, right? And if your performance is as a tactical athlete, that's a very specific program design. And a lot of that information wasn't really available to us. It was, you go in and you worked out, you did your traditional bro split, your back and your buys, your chest and your tries, and that was it. You did whatever muscle and fitness told you to do, and we didn't have a whole lot of that good programming and coaching to come along with it that I really wish we had. Like I said, my growing up, majority of what I did was cardio, intensive cardio and long distance kind of stuff. And I didn't learn to lift any kind of bigger weight until I got well into my career. Then it was at the advice of a bodybuilder. So that was a lot of the work that I was doing, which is great. It's phenomenal. It'll get you bigger, but it's not necessarily going to translate over to, the explosive techniques we needed when we were taking somebody into custody, things like that. So I wish I had that experience where we had somebody to kind of guide us through that. And there's been a very big shift in the industry, I think, now that it's getting more tactical specific. when it comes to how we train, like how we set up our programming, where the emphasis is. And that's important, where it's got to be well-rounded. It's better to be a jack of all trades than a master of one in this case, because you want that ability to be confident, not only your skills to run somebody down, for example, but also to take them into custody when you do. Because that's like, it's great. It's great if you can catch somebody, but what happens when you do? And that was always the big question, is like, you want to be good enough at both. Because once your endurance is shot and your heart rate's through the roof, your tactical ability to do anything else is pretty much gone. And it's great that now we have the transition between sport science coaching that's bleeding into the tactical performance arena, or you can have the hard data behind that to support that, of why they're equally as important skill sets for us to have.
Yeah, and I think that's something I've certainly seen as well, as different departments are putting emphasis on it, whether it's, hey, we're going to give you an hour on shift to go work out. We're going to set up gym equipment in the precinct so that you can work out during shift, or make it accessible or easily available. I think the next level is what you're highlighting then is, okay, how do we help people to understand, what do I even do when I walk in the gym? Because to have the equipment and have the time is great. Now we need to figure out what's the right balance of strength training with some cardiorespiratory endurance, so that if you're doing 12-hour shifts, you're not completely wiped, but you're still building not only a foundation, but ideally progressing a little bit, so that you're continually noticing some of those fitness gains. And so for you, while you were in your role with law enforcement, were you starting to study and become more knowledgeable yourself in sport and performance practices? Because now you mentioned like having the CSCS, having the TSAC, all that. Was that something that you developed only after law enforcement, or were you starting to learn and put some pieces together while you were still in, of like, hey, I think I really am passionate about fitness and health and how to help people in that way?
Yeah, when I started getting into the training role more, working as a training detective, we had a lot of onboarding classes that came in. So we'd be responsible for their fitness, getting involved with that, because you want to start people off on the right foot. That's the best thing you can do with any profession. Bring people in and set them up with great expectations from the start and good habits from the start. So we started doing more of that. I got a basic law enforcement peer fitness trainer cert. I started getting personal training certifications after I got out, and I opened the business, was when I actually went and tested for the CSCS and the TSAC. But the entire time, just studying the knowledge, trying to gain more insight to what's going to be effective. Because a lot of times you come in and it's that boot camp style of training where you just think more is better, and that running people into the ground is the answer. Because that's what every tactical boot camp program looks like. That works for the military. It's got to work for us. Well, we're not the same as the military. Hate to break it to all the law enforcement people out there. It's paramilitary. And if you're running yourself into the ground to where you're sore every workout, you're probably doing it wrong. You're setting yourself up for injury. Like, you shouldn't be at a 9 out of 10 on a pain scale after you finish every single workout you go through. It's okay to go to that pain cave and hurt during a workout, but if that muscle soreness is lasting 2-3 days every single time you go and work out, probably a little bit of an issue with that program. You might be taxing your body a little bit too much. And it's trying to find that understanding, because in the beginning, I wasn't doing that for myself, for sure. I was trying to push myself as hard as possible in as many ways as possible in the beginning. And it's definitely not the best way to go about it from a longevity standpoint. And the best thing we can do is teach people to be consistent, because I think that's the other thing, is people will get onto that workout program and they'll do something and they'll push themselves really hard for a good week or 2 weeks. But then they're injured, or they're too tired or too sore to work out and maintain that for the next 3 weeks after that. So then all of a sudden, instead of going every day, now they're in there once or twice a week and their results are dropping off and they wonder why. And it's trying to build that understanding of really how their body feels in comparison to what it's capable, and where you should be at with your programming. And I think that's one of the biggest things that I had to learn during that time period, is what's too much and when do we need to scale back on what we're doing. And also, like you said, so that it's not affecting our ability to do our job. Because again, you can be a firefighter and you can work out on duty, but if you go as hard as you possibly can in your workout for 45 minutes, are you going to be capable of entering that structure fire in the middle of the night and dragging a body out? Is that going to be in your wheelhouse if you're already sore? Are you going to be at your best capability if you've already run yourself into the ground for an hour beforehand on shift. That's a consideration that we have to take. Same thing, even from a learning perspective. Like if you're running yourself into a ground and then going and trying to learn, like, are you going to be like from an academy standpoint? Are you going to be as effective? So you want to make it to where you're getting better and you're doing good work, but you're not inhibiting the other areas of your life in the process.
Have you found any like best practices or ways that you've come to understand how to find that balance? Like if I'm in law enforcement or, a firefighter and I'm trying to figure out like, is this too much? Is this not enough? Are there certain things that you encourage your clients to reflect on or think about, or just kind of take stock in to see like, yeah, I'm on the right track? Because like you said, like some soreness is great. We're hitting the muscle groups, they're breaking down, so they're going to get stronger. But yeah, if it's like I have a hard time getting out of bed in the morning, or I have a hard time getting up and down out of my chair, like then we're starting to be a little bit more concerned. Or anything, best practices you think around that?
I think it's hard to say because it's a delicate balance of like what builds mental resilience versus what can we push through versus what should we push through and like what's going to cause me injury, which is why I think everyone, like regardless of where you're at in your fitness journey, everyone needs a coach or a program that they should be on, period. Because number one, you shouldn't be writing your own programming, just my own personal opinion, because you're never going to prescribe the stuff you don't like. That's number one. And a lot of times it's really hard to look at your own numbers and look at your own performance and gauge where you're at. Right. It's always great to have that outside eye that can kind of guide you along and see you from what you're used to doing and then say, hey, maybe it's time to scale it back. Because a lot of times we won't do that for ourselves because we want to push through and we want to do more. Like we want to go harder and we never want to be the one to tell ourselves, like, I got to slow down. So if anything, regardless of whether it's, a fitness coach, it's a business coach, it's like everybody should have a mentor or a guide for all different aspects of their life. I'm a huge proponent of that, even for coaches out there. Like they think they know it all. They think they have the greatest programming. It's not just about the programming. Everybody can use the help at any given point. But I think when it comes to the physical aspect of what you're talking about, it's like if you get, and I heard this from another one of our specialists, if you're up and out of bed and your soreness is generally like a 6 or higher out of 10 that day, then it's time to scale back and start doing, like, not to say you have to do nothing, but focus the intensity, lower the intensity, focus on recovery work, more of that mobility piece rather than just trying to grind yourself into the ground because your body's telling you something. And that's what you really need to be doing, is listening to what your body's telling you. It's me saying, hey, we don't need another strength workout today. What we need to do is some more, like, flush out our system, you know, do some recovery work, do some foam rolling, lacrosse ball work, additional stretching, maybe some banded resistance movements, stuff like that. That's not going to be as intense. So that's the way I kind of view it. It's not a don't do nothing mentality. Like because a lot of people will get into programs and they say, hey, listen, if I'm not sticking to this program 100%, I'm failing. And that's not the case. The goal is to move every day, right? Do something every day to be better. And that something might look different. It might not always look like picking up weights.
Yeah, and I love that perspective because I've noticed that, especially as a coach as well, is you can have a class of athletes going through the same workout, and the next day, half of them are like, "Oh my gosh, my legs feel completely wrecked, like I can't even walk," and the other half of the class is like, "I'm fine," and they did, on paper, the same workout. So everybody's body is going to respond differently to different stimulus you put on it. And so having a coach who can help have some of those conversations, super, super beneficial. And also knowing that, just like you said, it's okay to deviate from the game plan. And there's so many different ways you can move to help your body still progress forward without breaking down so much that you can't show up for work, you can't show up for your family, you can't do all the things that you want to do in life outside. So I think that's a great perspective of find a coach or a mentor, and at the same time, do those little check-ins of where am I at? How am I feeling? What can I do today to help me progress forward versus feeling like I only have to do what's on the piece of paper.
And like you work with CrossFit, which is a great example of like people like being able to scale, coming down and scaling when you should. That's important. I mean, it's not just like, oh, I hit the RX button today. Like everything's normal and fine. Like sometimes it's great to scale, like, because you just got to recover, or like that's where you're at. Just acknowledging that, like my body's not ready to go RX plus all the
It
time.
is funny you mentioned that because it surprises people, probably similar to what you experience with sleep, but by scaling, people tend to progress faster than by trying to do too much too soon, too heavy, too fast, whatever it is. Because like you said, there's this balance of I want to push myself to stress my body, but then I also have to recover. And so if your balance is out of whack and you're stressing your body way more than recovering or pushing it too hard, you're not going to progress with your strength numbers, with your VO2 max, with these other factors. So there is this balance that you have to find there. And I think it's helpful to have somebody guide you along that journey as well. And so once you finished up with law enforcement, you made that decision to transition out. What was that process like? Because I think, like you said, a lot of folks that I've met in law enforcement is like, hey, I'm in it for life, 20, 25, 30 years. And then when we start looking at the statistics around life expectancy because of the wear and tear and emotional toll it takes on people is scary statistics. And I think it's accepted. But when you decided to make that transition, what was that process like for you? And was it a challenging one? Did you find that there was, a sense of peace or relief, or was it like, do I want to go back? What was that process like for you?
There's a little bit like it's hard to walk away from, because I love what I did. I love working, like I said, working with dogs is one of the best things you can do, being a canine handler. I trained dogs for a long time after that just because I couldn't let it go. Love working with my dog still. And it's hard when you have that title and you carry, like we talked about, you carry that around like a badge of honor for so long. It's just who you are. It's what you identify as. It's an entire culture that you're embedded in. So to walk away from that completely is very difficult. It's hard to see things in a different mindset when you've seen the world from that perspective. Like you see the world from that place, and it's not always a great one, you know. So to come and try to be more optimistic about things was difficult. More trusting was very difficult, and dealing with a lot of like, because even with what we see every day, day in day out, a lot of the bad things that law enforcement has to deal with, those just don't go away. And especially like even with therapy, when people go to therapy and they do that and they expect like, you know, 4 hour sessions to solve 15 years of traumatic experiences. It's not like that ever happens. That's not like necessarily the answer. So I think learning to deal with all of that and finding a new role was difficult, definitely at first. It helped to start incorporating more stress management techniques on a regular basis, which is great for any profession, not just law enforcement or first responders. Like everybody should really be doing more of that, I think personally, but starting to incorporate more mindfulness exercises, being present, working on being present, not disassociating was huge. And yeah, being able to just trust in a lot of the process that was happening was really, really difficult, but ultimately worth it when we got out. It's a hard thing to describe because you do miss it still. Like you miss, the interaction that you have with your shift and your coworkers and the people you worked with, because it's fun. It's a great lifestyle. It's we get in for the right reasons. It's just a lot of people forget those reasons along the way, which is the part of the problem. And I got a great speech from or advice from a mentor of mine when I first started my nonprofit to help the law enforcement get training and education. And she initially asked me, she ran a nonprofit, and she said, "Hey, why are you doing this?" And I was like, "Well, I want to help. I want to help officers and I want to help people." Like most of the time when you get somebody who gets into public service, they say, "Why are you doing this?" And they say, "Oh, it's because I want to help people." And her answer was, "Well, then don't do it." Kind of offended at first because what do you mean? Like, I'm trying to help people. I'm trying to do like good work here. Like, this is important to me. Why would you say that? She's like, then you're not doing any good. And I was, how? How am I not like, how is this not doing good? Explain that to me. And it was a really interesting perspective when she said law enforcement and fire, they don't want help. They don't want to be told that they need help, because to imply that you need help is basically saying that they are helpless. And of all the people on the planet that are helpless, they are not it. Like they are very capable. Like they don't need that. They don't want that mentality or that ideal that they're helpless and they need somebody coming to their aid. So if that was the reason for getting behind what I was doing, then the energy behind it was wrong. And that what I should really be doing is that if I want to help, I don't need to offer help. I need to just remind them about why they got into it in the first place and bring them back to their why. Bring them back to the why are they here? Because the reasons we do get in are usually way more powerful than anything else that we make up along the way about why we're there. So like, because everybody has their reason for any interaction or anything that people get into. They have their initial why, right? And I think as coaches, especially, our job is to bring people back to that why, about why were you here in the first place, and remind people that consistency will always be better than motivation, because consistency is that dedication to that why from the front that you started with. That isn't just because, oh, like this, like, because you might, like, there's a reason somebody wants like that pain process from the pain, right? You got to a certain point where you said, I want to do this. I want to get better in this area, or I want to start this thing. Like there's the why behind it. And that's going to be the driving force that you got to remind people of constantly. So I think a lot of getting into my business out of law enforcement was reminding myself also of that. Why did I do this? And it was to create that better home life, that better family life. I could have a broader impact, I felt, with my business and coaching, and now through O2X, on people as a whole than I could in my position in law enforcement. So again, like that growth takes a long time to process. It's not an overnight thing, that's for sure. But thankfully, I've had a lot of advice along the way and a lot of really good examples to follow.
Yeah, I think that introspective approach of reminding yourself why you're getting into something, why it's important to you, why you want to do it, those are all incredibly meaningful and powerful questions. And it's something that I know has been shared with me that I think about too with the opportunity to train and work with people is for a lot of folks, it's better to be reminded than it is to educate or learn. Like there are certain times where it's like maybe they just didn't know something, but so many times it's just the gentle reminders to look at something a certain way or think about something or reflect, and then they can figure out the answers for themselves. And it's not like we have to give them the answers. So I think that ties in really well with that. And I like also that you highlighted this idea that it is a process. It's a journey. There's not a quick fix for physical things with supplements. It's not a quick fix for therapy to look at 15 years of experiences and what do we do with all of that. It's not a quick fix for family life. Having a process approach and just working consistently, showing up for yourself, that's the name of the game. And I know I've been grateful to get to know you over the years here with O2X and your insights. And I know you've got a lot of great insights that you've learned from folks in the field as well. And so it's been fun to hear your story and see what you have to bring to the table. And so for anyone out there who's interested to maybe connect with you or learn more about what you're up to or hear about your business, what are the best ways for folks to connect with you?
Best way, honestly, is through LinkedIn. On LinkedIn, just Stephen Scrobe, my name, with O2X Human Performance. The other way would be through Instagram. It's at Stephen Empowers, one word. That would be another great way that I can reach out to people. Again, all of my content and information generally revolves around tactical fitness space, and then large portion of the family fitness as well, because I have a huge focus there because everything I think is intertwined. So I think, home life is just as important because that's what we all go home to. But definitely, like anyone in the tactical space, we have a lot of really good material there that we're always putting out a lot of information on new programs or ways we can support, like I said, the first responder community.
Awesome. Well, I've enjoyed getting to hear your story and what you've learned over the years. Thanks so much for jumping on the podcast today. I look forward to the next opportunity we get to connect with an O2X workshop.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate it.